Welcome to the Education Insights Focus on Behavior podcast. We're here to talk about all things behavior in the world of education. We take the science of behavior and break it down for educators into easily implementable steps, and we're excited to spend some time with you. Get ready to talk through behavior, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can all improve our work in schools so we as educators can be more fulfilled and our students can be more successful.
Welcome to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I am always excited to have my co-hosts with me, Daniel Irwin. Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
And Dr. Daria Lorio-Barsten. Hi, Daria.
Hi, everybody.
Your title makes your name like it's like awesome, and also I have to think about it. And we have, as always, our producer, Emily Muse. Hey, Emily.
Hello.
Emily keeps us on track, which is always a good thing, as we can tell. So we're going to start out today. I was thinking about this as I walked into a couple schools lately, and one of the things that I think about is when we walk into a school, there are some schools that I walk into and I'm like, wow, this is such a warm, welcoming, happy school, and I'm happy to be here. And then there are sometimes I walk into a school and I don't get that same warm, fuzzy vibe. So I wanted to see if this is just me or if other people have this experience and what some of those contributing factors might be to that. So what do you all think?
I think you can pick up on it pretty quickly. And, it's not something I like actively have really thought about looking for, but it definitely is something that when you come into a building, when you walk into the front office, as you're signing in, front office people are the vibe setters, I think. You know what I mean? How they welcome you, whether there's administration in the front office, um, how they help you check in, make sure they know what you need, you know whatever. Um, so I think that's one part of it, and I think that can really speak volumes about kind of that vibe of a school, because it really kind of is that hub of everything's coming and going through through that main office. Um, the other thing is just sort of, it's the interactions you have with the people. So if you're walking from the office to a classroom, which is typically how my time is spent, immediately kind of getting into a school, like who's looking at you and saying hi? The kids seem to be having a good time. Um, the tone of voice that you're hearing, the sort of the pace, the heartbeat, you know what I mean? Just sort of that general gut feeling sometimes. Very behavior analytic of me, but sometimes it's the combination of all those things that sort of gives you that initial impression.
No, Daniel, I think you're right. I think it's like within the 2 seconds that you make the first the gut feeling, right? Like the judgment call, the first impression. And I think that the front office is in a place where they can make or break that first impression, that then everybody builds everything off, right? And so I think about when you walk in, whether you are greeted as a starting point makes the world of a difference. Whether you are greeted in a tone that's a warmer welcome, like welcome to our school, versus like, what do you need, right? Who are you here to see? I think that sets the tone. I even would go to say, I think a lot about the decorations in the office and kind of the ambiance, because truthfully, particularly around the holiday season, you can tell if the decorations are inclusive of a variety of celebrations and a variety of populations or not. And I think about when I walk through the doors of a school, I love education. I work in education, so I am going to be willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, and I generally want to be there, right? I'm either there to see students or teachers or my own kiddo or whoever. And I know how the school systems work, and I know kind of what to expect. But I think a lot about parents who come into the school for the first time, or family members who come into the school for the first time, or family members who may be coming in for a meeting that is a little bit contentious or they are nervous about. And I think about how that front office can make or break what people think about what kind of place this is. And then I really appreciate a good lingering in the front office because not only do I want to see how do people respond to me and how do they greet me and other adults that walk through, but I really place a lot of stock into how the folks talk to the students who pop into the office because that's a really strong indicator to me about the culture of a school. So when there are kiddos coming to drop off attendance, if that is still a thing in some of our schools, or even just students who are being tardy, the way that they are greeted and the way they are either welcomed into the school or the opposite of that, I think speaks volumes as to what are the community agreements about how folks interact with one another in this specific school. So I think there are lots of different pieces that we may not even be thinking about actively when we first encounter a space, but I think all of them add up to, it's like the pointillism art where they all are little bitty dots, but then when you step a little bit further back, you see the whole picture. I think that there are details in the front office very similar to that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's funny, we've all worked in districts that have multiple schools in them that we have to visit because of our jobs at the time. And there are definitely some schools I would go to, and I was always excited to go there because I knew that I would walk in and it was a great experience, even if I had to go for a tough reason. And then there are schools that I would walk into, and I would just dread walking down the hallway to the office until I could get to my teachers, even if they were great teachers that I was going to visit. And I think the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is it's not about the functional building, right? Like I've been in brand new, shiny, beautiful schools that cost millions and millions of dollars that I'm like, ugh, as I walk down the hallway. And I get that like icky feeling in my stomach. But I've also walked into schools that were built in the 50s, the 60s, that have been around a really long time, but like they're happy places and I walk in and things are great and you just get that happy vibe almost and it really is that vibe check of the school and it does speak to the culture of what that school is like and I think you're right, the front office staff are definitely the first point, right? Like when they come in, and I love, Daria, how you said it, the hey, welcome in, I'm happy to see you, versus like, what do you want? Why are you here? Who are you here to see? Those questions don't come off quite as well. But I also think, do you see kids' artwork in the halls? Do you see, and that's not just elementary school, like that's all the way through secondary. Do you see things about students, or is it just kind of this sterile environment that is not really reflective of who the school is?
Well, and you can tell if the school is it student-centered? Is it not? Do people like to be there or not, right? And we all have rough days, and I certainly don't judge people if you're having a rough day. People who work at the front office are people too, right? So they all are entitled not to have to always be cheaper, and maybe that's not their personality, but I think you can be inviting and welcoming and inclusive without having to have a super cheaper personality. Um, I recently walked into a high school. Selena, you mentioned a high school, and this just chuckled. I chuckled because there was a student that came in and she looked at the receptionist and she said, You know, this outfit today of yours, it's not bad. And just kept walking. And I just started laughing because I said, I think this is as high of praise as it gets from like a high school
I was gonna
girl.
say that would stick with me for like a year probably.
Oh,
Like
you'd
that
have to wear
outfit would
that
be in
outfit like
heavy
every
rotation.
day.
You'd be
Yep.
like,
Right.
"Yep, this is my outfit. I need
And
two, at
so
least two of these
I
same
have made
outfits."
it.
right, but the thing that I just loved was how much the individual really chuckled and kind of took it to heart. And she joked with me and she said, "Oh yeah, this is it. This is the pinnacle. Let me write the day down. You take a picture of this." But I just thought this to me is a very strong indicator that obviously these two have a connection, they have a relationship, they have a certain level of rapport and a certain level of comfort. And that is how a school should be, right? Like those should be the interactions that we should also be witnessing in the office. I love when I'm in an elementary school and I'm watching like a couple of kids patiently waiting for the principal to come in to go get something from the treasure box because they did something amazing in the classroom. And you can tell their excitement because their legs are always like wiggling. They're always chit-chatting about each other and they're all talking about like what kind of pencil will it be today? And just those little things that, do they matter like as a standalone instance? Probably not so much. But all of those little things do add up to a really important part about what kind of school it is. It really does. These are all the minuscule little ways that the culture and that the environment are really made of.
Well, and I think the important part is well, first impressions may not always be accurate, and we shouldn't have bias in those things. They absolutely color our experience, right? And so, I mentioned when I worked in the schools, I had 70 plus schools that I went in one of my divisions. And there are some schools that I preferred to spend time in versus others because of some of those things that were occurring. And now keep in mind, I obviously went to wherever I needed to be, but the experience was different based on those early interactions that were part of the entering the school kind of thing. And so actually this brings me to our main topic today, which the title of today's episode is Welcome to Our Classroom. And so, what I kind of want to focus on today is why is it important to set up a welcoming environment, and how do we do that in a way that works for us and works for our students? So, I think the first question we start with is why is a welcoming environment important? And we've alluded to this a little bit with the school itself, but when we bring this to the classroom level, what do you all think?
Because Daria said it, it's like the first 2 seconds, right? And so, first day of school, first minute of school each day can really set the tone for how kids are going to respond, how they're going to interact with each other, how they're going to interact with you, how they're going to think about challenges, how they're going to, communicate or their outlook on the day. And so, I mean, it's certainly, I think it's critical because you're setting, and I don't have anything else to say about that. It sets the tone. It really sets people in the right direction for the day. Yeah, go
Well,
ahead, Daria.
and I think it also speaks to, all right, educators, you get to hear this name one more time, I think like at least once every day, right? It speaks to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because if you're not in a place where you can be safe, where you feel safe physically and emotionally and psychologically, then it's going to be really hard to focus on academic tasks and to focus on things that we're asking you to do in the classroom, which is generally learn new skills or new material that you didn't know and that you didn't have before. And so, without building that supportive learning environment, students aren't going to be able, nor potentially want, to put forth their best effort. And I think about our students, and I think about the research part of that, where there's really strong connection between supportive learning environment to all sorts of academic and non-academic outcomes, right? To whether we are talking about grades, and classrooms with a more supportive learning environment have higher outcomes academically speaking, and thinking about graduation rates and thinking about the number of interfering behaviors. I mean, when you're coming into a space where you feel a sense of belonging and you can be yourself and you know that people care about you, you're going to want to engage to the best of your ability. Whereas if you feel like you're coming into the space where you're constantly have to be watchful of something, whether it is a peer interaction, an interaction with a teacher, or you're waiting for some other crisis to occur, right? You're not going to be able to give your full attention and to share that cognitive load in that particular space. And so to me, it's very clear that in any classroom, there should be that warm and welcoming environment so that kids can focus. And also, it's a whole lot easier and it seems more enjoyable for kids and adults alike to spend their day in a manner where they feel included and supported. And I often think about our school system as a whole, and I think about mandatory schooling. And I think about how particularly our younger students, well, really all students, by law, I'm mandated to be there at school. And since we all are going to have to be here together, we might as well make it a really fun day and a great adventure as opposed to kind of suffer through a day and dredge through the learning.
I think there's a really important behavioral component to this as well, and it's something that we've talked about previously. But when you have that warm, welcoming, positive environment, it's the first steps of pairing yourself as a reinforcer too, right? And so you come in and kids see materials that they like, materials they're familiar with. They see, pictures on the wall that are warm and happy and make them feel welcome and all of those kinds of things. And then when you as the adult also are welcoming and warm and all of the things, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to hug every kid who comes in your room if that's not who you are. I'm not suggesting we have to be fake or not be who we are, but just saying, I'm really glad you're here. It's really nice to meet you. I'm so happy that you're going to be in my class. Those kinds of things can go a long way, and they start you off on a really good place, like I said, to pair yourself with reinforcement. So hopefully you yourself also become reinforcing, and it builds that relationship that Daria likes to talk about.
And I think it also gets to, we can operationally define warmth as lots of different things that are authentic to you, right? What me being warm looks like is probably going to look very different from what it looks like for Daniel, what it looks like for Selena, what it looks like for Emily. But I think that all those little, the devil's always in the details, right? I think about, and there's a ton of research on the importance of greeting students at the door. I mean, just being able to say hi when a student walks in, it feels very different if you're entering the space and no one is even greeting you, whether it is front office or the classroom. Whereas now I want to start singing like the Cheers theme song where everybody knows your name, right? Like when you are greeted and when, regardless of what kind of day might have happened yesterday. Yesterday, we might have had a really off day. But I'm so glad that you're back to learn today. I'm so glad that you're here so that I can teach you today, right? There are ways that I also think a lot of times about our kiddos who come to us from very different life experiences and very different environments and situations. And I think about how the entry into your classroom is really a transition in its own way. It's almost making the room to say, okay, we are here to learn. We are here as a learning community. We are going to do this transitionary activity so that we can focus on the learning that's about to come. And I think this is why it's so important to start with, yes, greetings at the door, but also to start with something positive and something, warm and inviting, kind of that warm welcome.
Yeah, and I think keeping, you said it, your own personality as part of that, right? As an educator, it's the classroom that you're managing. It's for the students, but at the same time, the more authentic you can be with your own interests, with your own decor, the way you like to do things, right? That invites people in, and it personalizes the space to say, this is for us. And as the year goes on, you can build and include those things that students make and those accomplishments and, all those things that make classrooms really rich for kids. But I think being authentic and really thinking about like, how do you want this to look helps you as an educator, we as educators sort of feel our own level of comfort in there and understanding that like this is where I can be me as a professional, but also, that personal, that interest and strengths and needs line sort of comes in there and you can embed that into the classroom. I think the other part is, well, and to that point, I worked in a school where one of the teachers just had a very creative and mechanical mind. And so his class, there was stuff that would like come off the ceiling for, you know what I mean? Like there were like pulleys and stuff. And this is, I think it was a fourth or fifth grade classroom, but there's all this like how novel and fun is that to walk into that classroom and this person has just built these systems that work in the class. And so you can choose to sit at this angled table that comes up out of, it was all the stuff that he had created. And I think that such a genuine expression of his interest and what he liked to do one that I was a little bit jealous of, to be honest with you. Um, but that's his space, right? Like, and he's welcoming the kids in there and building those things for them. So there's this act of, I'm doing this because I think it's of interest, and kids know that. You don't have to say it for kids to know that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think just being yourself, and as long as you're nice, as long as
Yeah.
yourself is like a nice person,
And right. And if it's not, then, pretend like you're nice and
fake it
please
till you make it.
our students. Um, but I think there are also like opportunities throughout the day. I know that we're talking about like the kind of warm welcome and the entry, into the school. That's where we started. But I think it's so important to build that and honor that throughout the day, all day, every day, right? And I think about the classrooms that I have seen, whether they are high school, middle school, elementary schools, where student work is displayed, not just because it's displayed, but because the teacher authentically cares and because this is something that they are proud of and this is somehow that they are building the community. I recently was in a classroom and I saw a bulletin board that the teacher just had a prompt written of, tell me something good. And then the students, any good news that they had to share, or anything that they saw that was cool, or anything else that they just wanted to share, just put a bunch of post-it notes in there. And that board was halfway full. And I was in that classroom, back in the fall. And so I kept thinking about what a powerful and easy way to communicate to the students that I'm invested in relationships. I want to hear about the good things. I want to practice gratitude. I want to create the spaces that we can co-construct together. And I think that is really, really powerful and communicates so many more things through your actions, right? And it very visibly displays what your values are. And I love watching wonderful and looking at wonderful like bulletin boards and Pinterest worthy things, but I am much more interested in things that maybe don't look quite to the same polished quality, but are kid made. When I am looking at samples of writing and pictures and I can't tell if they're studying the moon or if they're studying cheese, my teacher heart is happy because I know that those are authentic products and I know that, you're involving the kiddos. And so I think there are little ways and big ways that we can make sure we are creating really inclusive spaces where kids can also be themselves, right? And I mean that, of course, be themselves and also honor the community agreements and engage in learning. But I think the more we give them room to be kids and to celebrate them for the brilliant little minds that they are, or not so little minds if they are secondary students, I think the more likely it is that we are going to get the most attempt from them to actually learn with us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, learning is risk taking, right? And displaying your newfound knowledge is a risk. And so when those things are in place, when classrooms are supportive and when the effort has been made to let students know that their products, their work, their achievements, their growth are celebrated publicly to display for everybody, then when those things come up that are challenging and inherently judgmental, right? I mean, you get grades, you get percentage correct on assignments. And so those things that can be really cut and dry sometimes, when those supportive pieces are in place and when students feel that they're part of that community, getting a 54C might, that's a throwback to my French grade in eighth grade. Students know that it's okay. We're going to grow from that, right? Like that precedent has been set. And so it's not the end of the world. It's a learning point. And that's that cycle of learning and risk taking and perpetual growth and sort of setting goals for yourself. It really sets the stage for being able to do that in a way where students feel essentially safe doing it, right? Or it's going to be okay if they don't meet that goal.
Well, and that's the other part is part of teaching is providing specific feedback on things that you do well and things that you don't do so well, right? Whether we're talking academics, whether we're talking about behavior, and those are hard conversations. I mean, those are hard conversations to be on the receiving end of. Those are hard conversations to be on, the one being able to start that conversation. And so I think in order for those talks to be authentic and to really be heard and listened to, you need to have this feeling of I am welcomed in this space and I am cared about in this space, right? Because if it feels very different as a student, if you're getting a conversation and if you're unpacking like, okay, well, this behavior did not go so hot, what can we do differently? If you have a person that you don't feel safe and you don't feel welcome to, it is very likely that you're going to jump right into defensiveness. It's very likely that you're going to want to escalate the situation because you don't have the trust. You don't believe that this person is in has your interest in mind or is willing to listen to you or understand you or any of those pieces, right? But if you have been in the environment where you feel included and when you feel welcome and when you're watching your educators time after time after time take purposeful actions to include you and involve you in an authentic manner, then you have enough trust to know that if they're telling you that this is not the way we interact in this space, then you have that trust and you're willing to listen much more likely than get defensive, right? And so it gets to what kind of learning space do you want to have and how do you want people, adults and kids, to interact in that space? And it could be a continuous battle and it could be because I said so, but there is a much better way that feels much better, but also has tremendous amount of research to support why that is leading to much better outcomes.
So I think the question that it would be really helpful for us to answer, and I think it's twofold depending on, what your role is. If I'm a teacher, what suggestions do we have for kind of looking at your environment, looking at your classroom, looking at those procedures and how do we think about, are we actually accomplishing this? And then I think the inverse of that is if I'm an administrator, how do I help teachers think through some of these things?
Yeah, I think there's a way, we have things that we want to look for, like as a coach, we want to look for in a classroom to make sure are in place um, to support the kids that are in it. And I'm wondering if thinking functionally around that and helping our educators sort of as they're thinking about their classroom environment and we're thinking about those common areas of need and reinforcement for students, right? What are those and how do I build them into the classroom? So we think about things like kids who need more attention to help develop that connection or that relationship, right? Is that built into my day? Like how am I making sure I'm addressing the needs of all students who crave and need connection and attention? Um, if it's getting away from things that are challenging, do I have a way that is essentially classroom approved for taking a break or requesting just give me a minute to breathe? This is a lot for me, right? Um, is there a way that they're getting access to the things they like to do, right? So we're just thinking kind of functionally through escape and access. Are those things built in? Are we providing instruction on them? Are they meaningful? Are we getting student input on how these things operate? If there's a quiet space in the classroom that students can go when things are too much or if things get too loud or, whenever they're feeling some kind of way, do we share a common language around that? And have we recognized that that is a need and some people need to do that and some don't, and that's great. And that's just how the classroom operates, right? So we're trying to catch as many of those student needs as possible by thinking functionally around where some of the maybe challenging behaviors come, whether it's calling out or whether it's, putting my head down on the desk. Are we able to meet those needs sort of within the structure of the classroom functionally? And then when students need more, we can ramp that up or we can change the delivery or the contingency of it, whatever. But are we addressing functions as part of the classroom structure to meet the needs of all kids and explaining that to them, really.
So I often think about in terms of voice and choice and looking for ways that those concepts are represented in the classroom, right? So I think about even when you walk into the classroom, when you look around the materials, when you look around things that are displayed on the classroom walls, I think about, are your students represented? Are their identities represented? Are their interests represented? And if I came in from a particular life experience, would I feel welcome in that space? I always think about my old like science classroom, and I would walk in and I would see all these amazing scientists who all happen to be white and who all happen to be older. And I would think about, as a girl, where are the scientists that look like me? And whether we're thinking about the messaging that we're saying or not, those are the things that kids can pick up on. And we certainly want to make sure that when they come into the space, they can see themselves represented and they can see themselves as belonging in that space and not just having a space and get the thought of like, oh, well, this isn't for me, right? And so I think you start there, and then I think it goes to how do you co-construct the space? And of course, you can't like give kids the freedom of this is the curriculum that we're going to be studying. That's generally not how our systems are designed, right? There are other systems that are designed that way, but generally that's not what our schools look like. We have specific set of curriculum, we have specific lessons, spacing guides, all of those things. But I think there's lots of room to co-construct different things. So when we think about classroom rules and expectations, or as we talk about community agreements, we can co-construct those at the beginning of the year. We can say, listen, here are some things that are required for learning. What do you need as learners from each other? What do you need as learners from me? And then the way we are setting the tone and then reinforcing it and making sure we're holding each other accountable has a very different feel because that's our learning community and not just this is a Dr. Lorio-Barsten space and the rules that she decided on, right? So any of those opportunities that we can work with students. They are opportunities for shared decision making throughout the day, all the time. And I think about little things that don't even matter. Do you want to complete this assignment in pencil or a pen? Does it really matter as long as it's getting completed? Do you want to do this activity or this activity? Or better yet, give kids a choice, right? I mean, you can look at universal design of learning and you can put that in practice in any classroom under any content for any grade level. And you already are going to be building in that supportive learning environment just by the nature of trying to capture lots of different voices and perspective. So, Emily, I'll put the UDL, Universal Design Learning, for you to put in the notes. But I think all of those kind of things really do make a lot of differences. And then I think it's important to look at two additional things. One is, where does your attention as a teacher go, right? What are you watering in the classroom, so to speak, if we are thinking of like a garden analogy? What do you reinforce throughout the classroom? Are you constantly correcting the behavior, or are you celebrating the things that are going well, right? And then lastly, I think we need to be mindful and now and then take good solid temperature checks of what does our verbal behavior as educators sound like, and then what does the student's verbal behavior sound like? Because those are really good markers of kind of telltale signs as to what kind of learning environment do you have. If your verbal behavior seems to be consistent redirections and error corrections, then perhaps we need to infuse some more of that positive reinforcement and some more of that warmth into the classroom to get to that supportive and inclusive learning environment. Or if your students are constantly chatting with one another in a very supportive manner and they are helping one another and they are including each other's perspectives in their discussions, then I think that's a great time to give yourself a pat on the back and say, I had fostered this lovely learning environment, right? But I think all of those little things, just like with anything else, now and then it's important for us to take a step back and to look and quickly evaluate or take a data point to kind of see how are things going. And frankly, nothing beats than asking kids to anonymously tell you, how does this classroom make them feel? Or, what are some things that are going well for them and what are some things that need improvement on? Or even my favorite quick assessment is, what are the top three things that you always hear me say as a teacher? Right? Because if you get back and all of your little note cards or all of your Google responses say, sit down and be quiet, well, maybe it's time to change course. But if you're saying things like, oh, that's fantastic, or great job, or any of those things, then I think that's another way, a reminder for you to stay course. So I think there are lots of things across different elements that makes it a supportive learning environment. But I think if you think about voice and choice, you won't go wrong.
Yeah, I was going to add something and then you kind of went there anyway, as I know it's hard, but I think asking for feedback is really important. Like, because of you have your own experiences and learning history, and there are things that we like and we don't like, and all of that. I think asking your fellow teachers, your colleagues, your administrator, like, how do you feel when you come in my classroom? And then, more importantly, to your point, Daria, asking your students, like, how does it feel when you come in the classroom? Are you happy when you come in? Does it make you feel comfortable? And there's different ways to ask that depending on, the student's age, the student's level, those kinds of things. But getting that feedback, I think, is really important, um, because again, everyone kind of comes with their own background and their own history. So,
I,
Daniel, did you have something to add?
yeah, I just in thinking about kind of all those components and the choice and um the feedback from kids, I think one of the things that's really important to kind of consider in our classroom vibe check is um I think a lot of times accomplishments get celebrated, right? We see the A pluses, we see the kids who have excelled and done really great things, and we all know who the kid in class is that gets the great grades. We all know who the popular kid is, right? Like all those things are part of social dynamics growing up, and I think the more we can emphasize things other than just accomplishments, but really sort of that process, that growth process, that recognition for individual students that we know certain things are harder. The more we can celebrate sort of that idea of, I don't know, I don't want to say tenacity, but some of those character traits, right? Like a stick to itiveness or asking for help when you need it. It's some of these things that kids develop some sort of connotation around that, like it's not okay to ask for help, or it's not, if I can't do it right, why would I do it? If the more we can sort of identify some of those, whether it's internal dialogue or strategies that kids are using to prevent their frustration from boiling over, right? Like the more we can kind of catch those little things that are very real and very much part of the process, and provide a name to them, and reinforce and catch kids engaging in those sort of growth minded activities, mindset, whatever. um I think the better off we're going to be. My mom has forever, and I don't remember this as a kid, but I do know this with my kids and how she talks to them when they're playing a sport, whether they're playing in a concert. Her praise is always, I really enjoyed watching you play, right? Win or lose, goal or not, she's there for them and likes seeing them do something that they enjoy. And so I think it's sort of that mindset that it doesn't matter if you scored 11 goals or 0 goals or you kicked an own, like it. We're here to support, we're here to do and help you celebrate the things that you like to do. um and not necessarily put sort of this achievement bar on everything, but really digging a little deeper and celebrating the process and the I don't want to say growth again, the process.
Well, and Daniel, when you talk about, the stick-to-itiveness and kind of giving it your best, I think sometimes we forget that those are behaviors that you can improve on and foster and hone, right? I think sometimes we fall into traps of saying, like, well, my kids just don't put forth as much effort as they did 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, right? And I think that while that might be true, that feel free to argue with me, yes or no, it doesn't really matter. I think it's important for us to remember that all these little pieces that make up a supportive learning environment are action driven. We have to take the steps to help students foster that. We have to model those behaviors. We have to figure out, how do we foster a learning environment when this is the way that we all act, right? And so there's lots of just friendly reminders about thinking, when you think of your ideal classroom, what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? And then start thinking about, what are the steps, or what are some small actions that you can take? What are some small little pivots that you can make your classroom a little bit warmer, a little bit friendlier, a little bit more inclusive?
Which is a great place for us to kind of put a stop on this. I think that's a really good question that we should always be asking ourselves, and that's where I keep coming back to that self-reflection. I think we just need to continually challenge ourselves to grow and just do the best that we possibly can. So, Daria and Daniel, as always, I appreciate your insights and your experience in sharing that with us. So this takes us to the end of our main topic and into our resource sharing, which is always our unsponsored ad for the day. Daria, you have our ad for today, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
I sure do, because I was thinking, in all those reflections that you can do and all of the ways that you can support a learning community, a great place to start and get some ideas and get some tools and checklists and publications and some research, if you're still not convinced by the things that we're sharing, is the National Center on PBIS. So it has quite a plethora of resources. It is www.pbis.org, which stands for the Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. It's a national center, so they have quite a few documents and articles and checklists and tools, and anything else you can possibly think about. It can be a little bit overwhelming. I would encourage you not to get overwhelmed, but instead to start with typing in supportive learning environment into the search bar and see what wonderful resources you can find under that. But it's a great hub for a lot of fantastic resources.
Great. And we will link that in the show notes, as we always do. So again, Daria, Daniel, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, y'all. It's always a lovely chat.
And Emily, as always, thank you for keeping us on track and moving forward.
Well, thank you also.
And also, always a good thank you to our listeners. We appreciate you. We appreciate you being with us. As always, if you have any questions, concerns, feedback, support, suggestions, whatever you may want to share, please reach out to us. Our email is cebis@odu.edu. That is CEBIS@odu.edu. And we will catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can join the conversation by emailing us at cebis@odu.edu, visiting www.cebisva.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky @CebisVA. Special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for their support of this project.